rights. If we start picking and choosing who deserves human rights and who does not, then the fundamental principle of universality, which is the basic principle of human rights, is undermined. Furthermore, human rights serve as a framework for social improvement and rehabilitation. By affording even those who have propagated violence the protection of their basic rights, we open avenues for rehabilitation, education, and reconciliation. I'll state an example from the presidency jail in Kolkata, from where I come. So there was this program started for dance therapy, and there were several people who actually emerged as very talented dancers, and they were cast in the Bengali regional movies. This is an example of people mingling with the mainstream. They're coming back to the mainstream society, and human rights gives them this chance. One thing what we must remember is that the poisonous ivy is always plucked by the roots and not cut off from the stem. Similarly, we need to eradicate the problem from the roots and not just have a quick fix solution by eliminating the troublemaker. Thus, if we want to stop violence, we must treat the propagators with kindness so that their minds are reformed. And then one day we will see a world where there is least amount of violence. We must also understand that the denial of human rights to propagators of violence can lead to a cycle of oppression and retaliation. If we abandon the principles of fairness and justice in this case, we risk creating an environment where retribution becomes the norm. And we truly do not want that. We want rehabilitation and reform to become this right thing for the society. Besides, when we deny human rights to the people, it also perpetuates violence and erodes the moral high ground which we accord ourselves while providing human rights. We often say that we are the people providing people with rights and accord ourselves a moral high ground. It actually denies the basic fundamental value of that fact as well. I would like to conclude by saying that while it may be emotionally challenging to extend human rights to those who have propagated violence, thinking of the victims of their violence, it is essential to uphold the principles that form the foundation of these rights. Doing so promotes a society that values rehabilitation, understanding, and the belief in the potential for positive change in every individual. With this, I would like to rest my case. Thank you.
Thank you, Shisha, for your stance. Now we will move to the rebuttal session. Are there any questions? As there are no questions, we will move on to the next participant. Next participant is Amna Asim.
I hope I'm clearly audible and visible. I hope I'm visible and audible.
Yes, you are visible and audible too. You may start.
Okay, on the count of three, two, one. Greetings to the chair. With your kind permission, I would like to speak against the motion that the human rights cannot be extended to propagators of violence. In words of Mother Teresa, human rights are not a privilege conferred by the government. They're every human being's entitlement by virtue of his humanity. Honorable Chair, my adversaries may question why human rights should be granted to individuals involved in criminal or violent activities. Firstly, safeguarding human dignity is paramount. Upholding human rights for perpetrators of violence underscores a commitment to the inherent dignity of every individual, asserting that even those who transgress should be accorded a basic level of respect. Secondly, the prevention of retribution is crucial. Ensuring human rights for all, including the perpetrators, can prevent a society from descending into a cycle of revenge and reprisal. It advocates for a legal system focused on rehabilitation rather than mere punishment. Thirdly, the establishment of legal safeguards is essential. Granting human rights to perpetrators ensures fair trials and due process, thereby preserving the integrity of the justice system and guarding against miscarriages of justice. Fourthly, providing rehabilitation opportunities is vital. Extending human rights to offenders allows the possibility of rehabilitation. Access to education, counseling, and health care contributes to the reintegration of individuals into the society as law abiding citizens. Lastly, Adherence to international standards is crucial. Applying human rights principles to perpetrators aligns with international standards and treaties, fostering a consistent and universal approach to justice and promoting global cooperation. Honorable Chair, instead of depriving propagators of the human rights, they should be given the opportunity to reform through the punishment stipulated by the laws. Every religion provides an opportunity for repentance and correction. Without this chance for repentance, society risks succumbing to the chaos of anarchy. The right to justice and the right to life are human rights in themselves. And will the opposition take away those rights too? The objective of punishment or sentencing should not be to inflict greater harm by depriving individuals of their humanity. Instead, it should ensure that justice prevails. Deterrence is a key aspect, with the aim of dissuading people from committing crimes and protecting society from criminals while also safeguarding criminals from themselves. The ultimate goal of punishment should be the reformation of the criminal, aiming to make them better individuals. Examples like Robert Downey Jr. and Joaquin Phoenix illustrate this point. Downey, after facing legal issues, underwent rehabilitation and reformation, making a successful comeback. If Downey's human rights had been denied instead of facilitating his reform, we might not have witnessed his portrayal of Iron Man. Honorable Chair, in conclusion, the point is humanizing criminals and not crimes. In the November 1947 issue of Harijan, Gandhi wrote, all criminals should be treated as patients and the jails should be hospitals, admitting the class of patients for treatment and cure. No one commits a crime for the fun of it. It is a sign of the diseased mind. Hence, taking away the human rights of the propagators or perpetrators of violence would not reform the society, but retribution, reformation, and rehabilitation will. Thank you.
Move to the rebuttal session.
So there is a wonderful question raised by Sirsa Gupta. So I would like to read that. Ma'am, do you think that it is fair for the families of the victim when we give human rights to the propagator of violence? Thanks.
Thank you so much to my opponent for this question. So the thing is that the right to trial is the basic right which falls under the human rights. So when we are talking about the right to trial, I believe that every person deserves the right to justify his innocence at least once. And since the right to trial is falling under the category of human rights, I believe that it should be given to the accused person.
Such an incredible articulation. Now we will move to the next participant, Samia Rajratan. And I would also request Akansha Bhatt, if she's there in the meeting, to mark her presence.
Am I loud and clear?
Here you are loud and clear too. You may start.
How are we to defend ourselves in the eyes of justice, when we handpick people to give human rights to? Greetings to everyone present here today. I, Samya, is here to speak against the motion that is human rights cannot be extended to propagators of violence. Human rights are universal and inalienable in nature. That is, they apply to all people, irrespective of actions or any such grounds. Denying human rights to anyone, even to those who have committed heinous crimes, can create a very slippery grounds for the rights of other individuals who are now at a potential risk of not only losing the government's accountability but faith in society that is needed to sustain in a system. Not treating perpetrators of violence with rights and dignity that every human deserves also hinders their reform processes, as they make them more of a vengeance seeker. There's this idea in head that the world is forever going to be against them and will see them in a bad light no matter how much they try to improve. Many ex-criminals who have, after serving their sentence, are still discriminated against, have still faced injustices in schools, jobs, and society till date. Understanding that there are usually social and psychological factors behind the violent behavior is so necessary, and that treating individuals with empathy and compassion can lead to rehabilitation. A study found that people who completed rehabilitation program had recidivism rate, that is the rate of reoffending, of just 27%, compared to a striking 73% for those who did not complete the program. This proves that rehabilitation is more effective, a more apt, and a more better method to deal with the crimes rather than the punishment. And as the famous saying goes, an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. When we deny rights, aren't we standing on the same pedestal just as that of the criminals? For what are we doing if not the sheer act of violence? If we start curtailing human rights based on violent actions, where is this that we draw the line? The governments and institutions have already failed and have already found out unjust ways to frame people using the preventive detention. If more freedom was extended to such governing institutions, who is to say and who is to guarantee that there will be no misuse of power? Furthermore, as my counterparts would have put up, I'd like to say that human rights are not equivalent to escaping justice. Extending human rights is not about protecting the criminals, but it is about protecting the integrity of judicial system. And as I conclude here, the judicial system is ensured with protecting the rights of both victims and that of the accused. As the famous saying goes, better to let 100 accused people free rather than punish the innocent. The system we live in is designed in such a way that once found guilty, a person is subjected to a sentence according to his crime, and so the victim gets justice. But the punishment that curtails human rights, goes on to fuel the fire of vengeance within criminals. But the punishment that focuses on improvement, that focuses on reforms, respects them, and makes the criminal put trust in the system, in the society, and gives them an incentive to improve themselves, to become better. Because at the very end, it is not about filling our jails with the criminals, it is about filling this world with people of fine character. With that, I rest my case. Thank you very much.
Move to the rebuttal session.
I'm sorry that was not audible.
I was saying thank you, Samya, for your stance. Now we will move to the rebuttal session.
Yes, please.
Is there any questions? As there are no questions, we will move to the next participant. Our next participant is Akansha Bhatt. As Akansha Bhatt is not present here, so we will move to the next participant. That is Abhishek Rawat. Abhishek Rawat is not here too. So the next participant is Kashank Prashar.
Yeah. On the count of 1, 2, 3. Good afternoon to one and all. This is me, Krishank Parashar, and I'm in the motion of the statement that says the state government should be a guarantor of our human rights. So, UNICEF report says that 1 in 10 children is being exploited in the child labor, is doing child labor. Why we are letting, who is responsible? Why our country letting this thing to be responsible, that the future talent or the people or the children who are going to make the new India are doing child labor? Is this how we are being called developed? This is how we are going to be developed without human rights? People who have a lot of money in our country actually ruling the country, not the government. So if a soldier dies, who is held responsible for this? If a person is died on the road, who is held responsible for that? If the person has not at all a single penny of money. So my stance says that the government should take and should observe that every single person in our country gets the human right. If we talk about the BPL people in our country who doesn't have money, are being exploited all over. If there is a South film in a reference that I would like to say, which said Jai Bhim, which is a real example and a real criminal example that how human rights are being exploited of labor people who have no money. Are they being exploited? Where are their human rights? Who is fighting for them? No, nobody is fighting for them. So where the BPL human rights are going, I would like to ask. So next, women. How many of women are actually getting human rights in our country? That's a big question out there. I would like to state that women right movement is the most oldest movement in our country. Our women act. When a man walks on a street, he has no thoughts. But when a woman walks on a street, she has several thoughts going on in her head. If a crime happens against a woman, is she's going to get their human rights? Because in our country, money wins over right. So if government is going to take the stand for the human rights responsibility that government should guarantee to each and every person, then only every single person will going to get a human right. And there is a Nobel Peace Prize winner, Kailash Satyarthi, who is who is an, who is observed and saved more than 80,000 children and women from being exploited. So we need people like him. But why do we need people like him? Because our government is not taking responsibility for human rights. How many of us knows what we are have? What are the rights of us? What are the right of an individual of a country has? We don't. Even the educated slot don't know. So rest is the answer. That how many BPL people or women who are not educated should have human rights. So if we talk about the sexual minority of a country, does they have human rights? No, they don't. So we have to take it forward too. So I would like to conclude my whole stance by saying few lines. If you are taking away a person's human right, you are taking away his life. So so every single person should get human right, and it will only get when there will be people working on it, where our government is taking the stance for the human right. And thank you. That's from my side.
Thank you, Prashant, for your stance. Now we will move to the rebuttal session. As there are no questions, we will move on to the next participant. That is Anahita Singh. And also after that, we will have a 5 minutes break.
May I
After
begin with my
Anahita.
speech?
Yeah.
Thank you so much. A very good afternoon to all those present here today. My name is Anahita and I will be speaking for the motion. I wish to begin today's debate with a question. What is the true nature of human beings? What are the innate characteristics that all of us share? Many have sought to answer this question, but few have had the impact that 18th century political philosopher Thomas Hobbes did. Living through a time of unceasing war, crime, and violence, Hobbes painted a rather gruesome image of the true nature of humanity. He said that we were all predisposed to competition, and if not governed over well, this competition could easily steer us towards violence. Think of a world in which you don't know who to trust because everybody's out to kill you and steal your resources, and you'd be imagining what he called the state of nature, the world human beings would create if left to their own devices. Of course, that is not the world we live in today. While there is some crime and some violence, we aren't exactly partaking in the barbarism that Hobbes predicted. So, what changed? The answer, according to Hobbes, was the social contract, an unspoken, unwritten agreement that all of us implicitly agreed to in order to live peacefully. The terms of this contract are simple. The state will protect you and preserve your rights as long as you agree to forsake some of these rights, such as the right to simply kill someone you don't like. You might not agree with the Hobbesian view of humanity, but one can't help but see the social contract at work every day. It is why we don't track down thieves ourselves and why we hold those around us to a certain standard of civility and behavior. This social contract is the foundation of our society, the reason we live peaceful lives. And it is for this sake that those who pursue the course of violence to further their aims must have their rights revoked. As mentioned before, the social contract is an unwritten and unspoken agreement, so many question what sustains it. And the answer is simple: trust. We trust each other to follow the rules because we know we can be held accountable for violations. We can be arrested and then put on trial if we fail to recognize the validity of other members' rights. It is thus to maintain this trust in the social contract and deter potential malevolent entities from violating it that we must hold perpetrators of violence accountable for their actions and revoke their rights. It is a simple enough idea when you think of it. Our humanity lies in our recognition of the social order. So when we choose to actively attack someone else's right to life, we end up losing our humanity and thus our rights. This is the only thing that can retain belief in the world order as we know it, and the reason even international agreements such as the ICCPR allow for restrictions on freedom of speech when it poses a threat to public order or the rights of others. History, too, is a testament to the fact that when we allow violators of law and order to go scot free, we risk putting all of society at risk. One such example is of Jimmy Lee Gray, an 18-year-old man who brutally murdered his 16-year-old girlfriend on the way back from school, but who, because of his young age and so called rights, was let out on parole after just 6 years. A few years later, 3-year-old Darissa Jean Scales disappeared from her parents' apartment, which is where Jimmy Lee Gray was found to be living as well. Investigators later found her body thrown into a ditch. She had been assaulted, abused, and ultimately strangled to death. Would you, in good conscience, be able to explain to Darissa's parents why she had to die simply because the rights of her abuser had been prioritized above all by the state? Would you be able to tell them why their 3-year-old daughter, who had the right to live a long, happy life, couldn't be protected by the society she had been born into? Would you be able to tell them why Jimmy Lee Gray had a greater right to his life, despite having proven that he had no regard for the lives of others? To conclude, allowing any person or entity which threatens the safety of others to keep their rights risks undermining everything our world is built on. For if we can't trust the state to keep us safe, we'll be forced to take drastic steps to safeguard ourselves and our loved ones. To give even one violator their rights, this revokes the rights of all those living around them, risking complete anarchy. I thus implore you to look at the bigger picture, for the life of one outweighs the life of many. Thank you.
Now we will move to the rebuttal session. As there are no questions, we will move to the next participant. Aditya Rana.
Yeah, am I audible and visible?
Is your audible and visible too?
Yeah,
You may start.
okay, great. Allowing unrestricted access to those who propagate violence is similar to handing a weapon to those who intend to cause harm. My warm greetings to everyone. This is Aditya Rana, first year student from Aryabhat College, speaking in favor of the motion human rights cannot be extended to the propagators of violence. Now, we need to understand what human rights are. Human rights refer to the inherent protections and freedoms of individuals, emphasizing on dignity, equality, and freedom. Who are propagators of violence? Those who actively participate, endorse, or engage in acts of violence. But not only direct perpetrators of violence, also those who advocate and incite for violence. These propagators of violence threaten the safety and rights of other individuals as well. Now, as we argue in the realm of human rights, I quote, the freedom of the wolves often mean death to the sheep. In context, by not extending human rights to the propagators of violence, we protect the dignity, safety, and security of the society as a whole. And now, as we know, human rights are grounded in the principles of dignity, equality, and freedom, allowing propagators of violence unrestricted access to these rights undermines the very foundation of human right framework. It is also a paradox where the rights of perpetrators would suppress the right of victims, leading to a perpetual cycle of injustice, and this scenario would erode public trust in the justice system. So, with these restrictions, we prevent the paradox of perpetrators over victims. Also, by not extending the human rights to the propagators of violence, we also send a strong message that action will have consequences. It is a necessity measure to underline the gravity of their actions. Even in context of the international law, international criminal tribunals mechanism says that restriction is not a denial of humanity, but a
Aditya, can
recognition.
you switch on your camera?
I think my camera
Yeah.
is it turned on now?
Yeah, now it's turned on. In
So,
middle, it was like,
okay, so it was turned off for a while.
continue.
So should I start over again with my camera on?
No, you can continue from here only.
Okay, great. So even according to the International Criminal Tribunal mechanism, these people who have violent actions, it is not a denial to their humanity, but a action towards their to underline the grave actions that they have taken. In conclusion, I would say that these restrictions toward human rights, these propagators of violence, is not a denial to humanity, not a denial towards justice, but instead it is a mechanism where human rights will again serve as a beacon of justice and not as a shield for those who want to exploit them. The rest, we also want to weave a fabric of justice. It also would serve as the cornerstone to keep intact the very foundation of human rights. So with that, we weave the fabric of justice, we weave the fabric of dignity, we weave the fabric of equality, and with that, we refuse the propagators of violence. We want to take strict actions toward them. And when these people who refuse humanity, who take actions that promote violence, do not want to give them human rights. Thank you so much.
Stance. Now we will move to the rebuttal session. As there are no questions, we will move to the next participant. Sambhav Pratap Bhatt.
Am I audible and visible? Am I audible and visible, sir, ma'am?
Yes, sir. You are audible and visible as well. So you can
Okay.
start on the count of 3, 2, 1.
When the propagators of violence dance a wicked art, shattering the victim's soul and heart, to extend the human rights for which they had no regard is in itself to disregard the righteous path. So let us stand today on reason's side in this debate where doubts arise. Human rights, though a noble quest, but not for those who fail the test, not for those who fail the test. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today I stand before you for the motion and on reason's side, and I will show you why in the next 3 minutes. Whenever a right is enforced or acknowledged, it is enforced on the premise that it has been violated and acknowledged on the premise that it can be violated. Similarly, human rights saw the light of the day when they were acknowledged by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and they saw the light of the day when the gruesome realities of World War II came before the world. It was then, and only then, the world realized that there are certain propagators of violence who do not respect inherent human dignity. Now, extending these rights to these propagators who do not respect these human rights is in itself a moral contradiction, a legal contradiction, and certainly a paradox. I would like to ask a question to all my worthy opponents here. Since when exactly the rights of law-abiding citizens start becoming a model of benefit for these propagators of violence? Is this the sense of justice which you advocate for? An honorable jury, if this is the case, then the sense of justice of my worthy opponents is buried, and the spirit of human rights which they follow has been strangulated. Mother Teresa once said, human rights are the attribute and the dependent or the attribute of humanity. I ask a question to you all. The propagators of violence who brutally murder families, innocent children, rape daughters and mothers of a nation, do they possess humanity? Do they? Certainly not. They do not possess humanity and certainly should not be conferred with these human rights. These propagators of violence cannot use these sacred rights, which are sacred to us, as a shield against justice. Because these rights are the shield of victim. These rights are the source of righteousness. It is that sword of King Arthur honorable chair. It is that sword which abides only to humanity and only to justice. Extending these rights to these propagators diminishes the deterrence theory. It nullifies the corrective justice. It holds no accountability of the offenders. It decreases the public trust in justice, and in totality, it erodes the very credibility of the justice system. When the justice system is eroded, it turns the society into a chaotic one. Yet there are some enlightened souls amongst us having halos over their head, like my worthy opponents, and they say with a divine smile that these rights should be extended to all the propagators of violence. It does not matter even if they are violating these human rights. Well, now, the stance which my worthy opponents has taken is mere pretense. They have been pretending, and as Plato said, that the worst form of justice is pretended justice. There is no need for us to do all this moral contradiction and legal contradiction. No need for us to be indulged in paradoxes. No need for us to be tangled in these paradoxes. No need for us to bring justice on its knees, and certainly no need for us to strangulate the spirit of the human right framework which we built with so hard work. The need of the hour to speak the truth. And I, along with all the worthy debaters who have supported the motion today, are standing here for truth. We need peace. Peace can be established on justice, and justice established on truth. And truth, my friends, can only be established when someone comes up and tells it to you. Today, I stand here for truth among all the debaters who support the motion. And the truth is simple. Human rights cannot, and in no sense, cannot be extended to the propagators of violence. Thank you.
Sambhav, for your stance. Now we will move to the rebuttal session.
So there is an excellent question raised by Rajdeep Mahanta, and I would like to read that. Brother, don't you think that truth like justice is not absolute? Thanks.
Truth is dependent on the circumstances and facts. For example, if there is a propagator of violence, and if the propagator of violence, there have been examples where the conviction of the propagator of violence has been established, but because they were human rights activists and they were considering him to be a human, and hence the death penalty was denied. In these cases, the concept of justice itself is denied, because a human who is committing a gruesome act of such violence, that raises a question on humanity itself. In that specific case, there is no scope for reformation. There is only scope for deterrence. And such human being shall be subjected to death penalty, and such human being shall be subjected to justice, and death penalty in that specific case is the absolute justice.
Thank you, Sambhav, for your admiring views. Now our next participant is Bhavya Garg. As Bhavya Garg is not in the meeting, we will move to the next participant, Akshat Kala.
Am I audible and visible?
Yes, you are audible and visible too. You may start.
Good afternoon, everyone. My warm regards to the esteemed panel of judges, volunteers, and all my fellow participants. Today, I stand firmly in support of the claim that the violators of human rights should not be entitled to the protection of those rights. Guaranteeing them the privileges of continued human rights undermines the very principle we seek to uphold. It sends a confusing message to both the victims of these violations and the community at large. Human rights are the foundation of a just and a compassionate society. They embody the value of equality, dignity, and freedom that we hold dear. However, when individuals or entities actively violate these rights, it raises a fundamental ethical dilemma. Should we extend the same rights to those who willingly trample upon them? If we continue to afford such a regime, we risk diluting the moral authority of these rights. It becomes a mockery of justice, a paradox where the oppressor and the oppressed share the same shield of human rights. In cases of gross human rights violation, accountability must take precedence over leniency. By withholding certain rights from the violators, we emphasize the severity of their actions and send a clear message that the society will not tolerate such behavior. This is not revenge. It's about maintaining the integrity of the very principles we cherish. Furthermore, extending human rights to those who violate them can perpetuate a cycle of abuses. Violators who curtail civil and political rights, including the right to life, liberty, freedom of movement and expression, to imposing serious restriction on economic, social, and cultural rights, such as right to work, education, and adequate standard of living. These propagators of violence create an environment rife with injustice. Their actions extend to patterns of discrimination and exclusion, targeting ethnic, religious, or national minorities, women, children, refugees, and internally displaced people. When faced with evidences of genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity committed under their watch, causing profound psychological, social, and economic impact, not only personal but also widespread economic losses. Lack of awareness among both the public and the authorities contributes to these violations. Hence, it serves as a compelling argument against extending human rights to those who propagate violence. If there are no tangible consequences for egregious violations, there is a little incentive for change. We should start by supporting victims instead of creating a victim blaming culture by extending rights to the propagators of violence. It's important to embrace our differences, but when it comes to people who propagate violence, who promote violence, we have to be careful. We have to avoid imposing one size fits all approach to human rights. It's important to find a balance between cultural understanding and standing up for what's fundamentally right. Hence, the violators of human rights should not enjoy the luxury of those rights themselves. I want to end my case with the assertion that it is our collective responsibility to protect and preserve the sanctity of these rights, not only for the victims, but for the sake of moral fabric that binds our global community together. And by this, I wind up. Thank you.
Akshat, for your stance. Now we will move to the rebuttal session.
Okay.
As there are no questions, we will move to the next participant, that is Yamini Mishra.
Good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible and visible?
Yes, you are audible and visible too. You may start.
Okay, thank you. Starting in 3, 2, 1. Distinguished skeptics, welcome to the intellectual battleground where we grapple with the age old dilemma. Should we or should we not snatch away someone's human rights like a mischievous kid grabbing the last piece of candy? It's a nuanced topic, and today we embark on a journey through the labyrinth of instances and examples to explore the implications of restraining human rights to curb undesirable actions. I am Yamini Mishra, and I strongly believe that human rights cannot be extended to the propagators of violence. The importance of extending human rights is beyond individual nations. It influences the global perception of justice and fairness. Putting a halt to the extension of such human rights involves a nuanced balance between upholding the principal fundamental human rights and preventing the abuse of these rights by those who pose a threat through their violent actions. Ibrahim al-Qassi, a former Guantanamo Bay detainee, was released to Sudan in 2012 after serving part of his sentence. Upon his release, al-Qassi reportedly became involved with al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. This case raised concerns about the potential for individuals released from Guantanamo to re engage in extremist activities. Had we levied some restrictions on his movement, nationally as well as internationally, curbed his communication channels, and put up proper monitoring, the case would have been different and multiple lives would have been saved. Picture this: you go to a grocery store with your toddler, someone you adore and care for. On the checkout counter, he picks up a pair of scissors. Now have a look at your everyday extremist with a rap sheet longer than your grocery list. Suddenly, you're handing them human rights on a silver platter. It's like giving that toddler the pair of scissors. Sure, it's their right to have it, but do we really have to see what happens next? Another example where extension of human rights to such propagators backfired involves the case of Said Kouaki, one of the perpetrators of the Charlie Hebdo shooting in Paris in 2015. Before the attack, Kouaki had been known to authorities for his involvement in jihadist activities. Despite being on the radar of intelligence agencies, he and his brother, Sheriff Kouaki, carried out the terrorist attack. Could stronger preventive measures been taken to restrict the movements or activities of Syed Kouaki, considering his known connections to violent extremism? I would like to ask the opposition whether this is what they want to do to help the world by extending human rights to the propagators of violence. Treating everyone as equal is one thing, but putting the lives of innocent individuals at risk just to fulfill an agenda is a serious concern. On a pragmatic level, denying human rights to propagators of violence is a matter of self preservation. If we allow the instigators of harm to hide behind the shields of human rights, we jeopardize the safety and well being of innocent individuals who may fall victim to their violent ideologies. In conclusion, while the principles of human rights are paramount, there comes a time when we must draw a line. By acknowledging the limits of human rights, we send a clear message that our commitment to justice does not waver in the face of those who seek to exploit it for destructive ends. In the end, whether we are antagonist, protagonist, or just caught in the crossfire, all of us want is what is right for our people. Thank you. Do give it a thought.
Thank you for presenting your views. Now we will move to the rebuttal session.
So there is again a wonderful question raised by Rajdeep Mahanta that reads that Yamini, as you gave the example of a toddler being given seizures, don't you think the better alternative is teaching him how to use it rather than altogether snatching it? That is prevention and reformation better than retribution.
Thank you for your question, sir. As I mentioned, that for a toddler, we can obviously teach him how to use the pair of scissors gradually. But for the first time when he picks it up, you can't trust him on how he'll use it. Similarly, if we give the propagators of violence a chance to improve, they may improve. But as I have already mentioned in my speech, that all those who were given a chance to improve, even after giving them a sentence, they went back to their initial ways. Is that how you see how a toddler will learn gradually? But those propagators didn't learn. So if we take away their scissors, their bombs, their extremist activities, they will have a chance to stay under surveillance, and us, our lives, your family, my family, we will be at a safer place. Thank you.
Now, our next participant is Sukriti Goswami.
Hello. Hello.
Hello, you are audible and visible too. You may
Okay.
start.
Manipur has been burning for almost 6 months now. And for the first 3 months, not even the regional news channels covered it, until they introduced violence into the equation. For the mainland to react, or the social media influencers to pay attention and trend hashtag Manipur is burning. Lack of representation and lack of empathy are textbook effects of violence. Human rights have been compromised way before the concept of violence was introduced. Oftentimes, when violence is not instigated, only then the mainland understands the rights parts in human rights. Compromise came first, violence only followed afterwards. Violence of any kind cannot be a response, rather, a solution to violence of any other kind. Under the huge umbrella of socio-economic violences, psychological and sexual violence are interrelated in more ways than one. A husband unable to provide for for his family cannot be a solution for the wife to slam defamation cases. In a perfectly Gandhian ideological society, human rights cannot be extended to the propagators of violence. But in the real world, the practical world we live in, nobody is going to turn the other cheek. Though on pen and paper, all Indians are united by the same tricolor, yet on the grassroots level, we are very separate individuals with complete contrary and contrasting cultures. There can be constant signs of discrimination and xenophilia seen all around the country. Maybe what I'm going to say is beyond harsh, but there isn't a better way to say it anyway. Violence, if not unite, for lack of a better word, sure does bring all Indians on the same page. When the largest statue in the world was created in Gujarat, that is, the Statue of Unity, people of the southern region of the country did not really care much, naturally. Yet, when the Babri Masjid was demolished in the same state of Gujarat, the entire subcontinent could not get enough of it, and it was all they could talk about. Manipur is burning, but the ones setting it on fire are doing it because their voices are not reaching to the ears of the mainland. Their desperation is shown in their violent actions. Now, do we not give them rights or deny them their rights just because they want to be heard? To summarize it better, isn't it self explanatory by the term human rights? Human rights, rights for humans, human beings, all human beings, irrespective of who they are, where they come from, what they do or have done. Even the pettiest of petty criminals have the right to protect themselves. And here we are, debating whether we should extend human rights to propagators of violence or not. Should we ask the people of Manipur this question?
Please, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Are you done with your speech, Sukriti?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you for your speech. Now we will move to the rebuttal session. As there are no questions, we will move.
Anahita Singh. Okay.
Okay.
So there is a question raised by Anahita Singh that read as, "Ma'am, you argued that violence can bring people together, but wouldn't you agree that it can also erode trust in society, thereby ushering in anarchy?"
As I've given the example of the ideal Gandhian society, I've also mentioned that we do not live in that society. We live in the practical world. Even though it's a very harsh truth that violence is uniting, it is the truth. Even the consequences that we have to live it because of violence, we also have to agree that violence is the measure that people are using to have their voices heard.
Thank you, Sukriti, for your stance. Now we will move to the next participant. Our next participant is Anushka Chaudhary.
Am I audible and visible?
You are audible but not visible.
Just a second.
if you are facing any trouble, we can reconnect you, and we will put forward in next slot. No problem for that. Just make sure that you have a stable internet connections. So it's time for the next participant.
Our next participant is Akshit Vardhan.
As he's not here, we will move forward for the next participant, Akanksha Bhatt.
Hi everyone. Am I audible and visible?
Yes, you are audible and visible too. You may start.
Thank you. A very good afternoon to everyone present over here. I'm Kansha Bhatt and I'm currently pursuing BSc Physics Honours from Doon University. Today I'm here to address a notion that challenges the very foundation of human rights. The idea that the human rights cannot be extended to the propagators of violence. While this sentiment is born out of fear, frustration, and a genuine desire for justice. While we champions the principle of equality, freedom, and dignity, it is crucial to address such a challenging question that whether these rights can be extended to the propagators of violence or not. As we all know, human rights are bedrock of a civilized society. As we all know,
Please unmute yourself. Akansha?
Akanksha, are we audible to you?
am I audible?
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
now you are audible. So just
So I
start.
should start
Yeah, yeah. From the beginning, you have to start.
from the beginning. Okay,
Yes.
from the beginning. Okay. Oh, hello everyone. I stand before you today to address a notion that challenges the very foundation of human rights. The idea that these rights cannot be extended to the propagators of violence or not. While we challenges the principle like justice, freedom, and dignity, we should definitely we should excuse me, just a minute. Can I continue later, please?
No, you.
There's some glitches. I don't know what's the problem.
Maybe she's reading. She forgot. Like she's reading. We can.
No, there's no glitches. What's the problem? Can I just begin after a minute?
No, sorry, you will not be given a chance.
Okay.
Yeah.
I should just continue. Oh God, how can I forget?
So the next participant here is Anushka Chaudhary.
Am I audible and visible now?
Yes, you are audible and visible.
Okay,
You may
kindly
start.
start my timer on the count of 3, 2, 1. It is said that no one truly knows a nation until one has been inside its jails. A nation should not be judged by how it treats its highest citizens, but its lowest ones. A very warm greetings to one and all present here. My name is Anushka Chaudhary, and today I'll be speaking against the motion. Humanity, compassion, liberty to choose at least one's life, let alone their human rights, seems like a thing of past. Because we live in a world that advocates democracy but practices autocracy and dictatorship. The few basic human rights that we have, are they really ours? That's a bigger question. And yet, we have found a way to make this already magnificent problem even more astronomical now by making statements like human rights cannot or must not be extended to propagators of violence. Ladies and gentlemen, let's take a look around the current scenario. Despite having so many human rights organizations and security councils, The world has failed to protect the lives of the civilians of both Israel and Gaza, let alone their human rights and sovereignty. No, it's not just about the ongoing death of humanity in Israel and Gaza. Neither is it just about Mehsa Amini, who died unexpectedly in the custody of Iran's morality police for the so called improper clothing. It is about thousands and thousands of such cases and incidents that are the thread that they pose. That when thousands of civilians can be robbed of their personal liberty and basic human rights, do you really think that the rights of the people already behind bar hold any significance to the authorities concerned? I don't think so. Ladies and gentlemen, when I talk about extending human rights to propagators of violence, I am in no way condoning or justifying their action, but rather reaffirming the principles that underpin human dignity. What I am trying to say here is that the conviction of a human does not render him non human. He still remains a human who should be treated like a human. He should be given the basic human rights available to every walking man on earth, like right to food and water, right against inhuman treatment, and some basic fundamental rights like Article 40, Article 19, and Article 21. And this, the Supreme Court of our country has upheld in cases like Sunil Batra versus Delhi administration, the state of Andhra Pradesh versus Challa Ramakrishna Reddy, and many more. In fact, ladies and gentlemen, the judiciary of our own country is premised on a human concept that a wrongdoer does not simply cease to be a human being just because he commits a crime. We rather believe that human nature is capable of redemption and that the object of punishment is not to inflict retribution but to reform the offender. In fact, it just allows us to address the deep rooted causes of violence, thus fostering an environment where individuals are more likely to abandon the path of self destruction and reintegrate into society. Ladies and gentlemen, this view I put forward because we live in a world where violence has no one definition but only definitions. Right to freedom of speech, right to freedom of expression is often misused against the same citizen that it was made for in the very first place. Thus, denying basic human rights to any individual whosoever in the name of making the world a better place is like making a proverbial blind man walk in the dark, hoping that he would find light at the end of the tunnel. There is no light, ladies and gentlemen. With that, I rest my case. Thank you.
Thank you, Anushka, for your stance. Now we'll move to the rebuttal session.
So there is an excellent question raised by Sambhav Pratap Bhatt. I would like to read that. When the habitual offenders depict inhuman offenses, then how can they be brought under the ambit of human right when they are the first to disregard humanity? Thanks.
Thank you so much, sir, for your question. So, when I talk about humanity and when I talk about that they should not be deprived of basic rights and they should be given the basic rights, I have nowhere mentioned the term absolute freedom or that they should be given all the luxuries and freedom that is given to the common man. What I am trying to say here is this, that they should be given some basic rights like the right to trial, and at least like just because somebody has committed a crime they should not be deprived of the title of a human being. That's what I mean when I said that. I hope that answers your question, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Anushka, for your views. Now, our next participant is Akshat Vardhan.
Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible and visible too. You may start.
Okay. On the count of 3, 2, 1.
Gather round, dear folks, for the riveting discussion on extending human rights to the champions of chaos. Because nothing says sanctity like handing out rights to those who make a hobby out of mayhem. Quite the paradoxical masterpiece we're unraveling today, isn't it? Human rights, as we all know, are the cornerstone of a civilized society. They embody the principles of equality, dignity, and justice. However, it becomes a peculiar conundrum when we contemplate extending these rights to the individuals who use violence as a means to spread their ideologies. Imagine a world where we graciously provide human rights to those who orchestrate acts of terror, promote hatred, and revel in chaos. It's a utopian vision, perhaps, but one that poses a fundamental challenge to the very essence of human rights. Take, for instance, the case of hate speech that serves as a precursor to violent actions. In the name of free expression, should we grant unlimited rights to individuals who openly call for harm to others based on their race, religion, or any other characteristic? In Haryana, Rahul Khan, a Muslim man, was beaten to death by three Hindu men who verbally abused him with religious slurs. Meanwhile, in Sedwa, Madhya Pradesh, a festive gathering escalated into communal violence when objections were raised against a 10-year-old Muslim boy attending a Garba event. In hindsight, to architects of the Bangladesh genocide 1971, where more than 2 million Bengalis were killed, or the mastermind behind terrorist attacks of 9/11, where more than 3,000 people died, would we grant them the same privilege of human rights? Would we, with a polite smile and pat on the back, offer them the same rights that they denied to countless innocent lives? The Nirbhaya rape case was the biggest blot on society's justice system. That one of her rapists escaped capital punishment under Juvenile Justice Act. Would any of my worthy opponent be willing to advocate human rights for these rapists and scum of society in front of those old eyes who have no tears left to cry for the loss of their daughter? Human rights are not one size fits all garment. They come with a responsibility and an inherent understanding that they shall not be wielded as a shield for those who actively perpetrate harm. It's like handing a bouquet of flowers to someone who's wielding a sword against your neck. In conclusion, while the others, principles of human rights are sacrosanct, we must be vigilant guardians ensuring that the very rights we champion are not turned against us by those who seek to undermine the very essence of civilized society. Human rights should never be a sanctuary for those who exploit these rights to spread violence and hatred. These murderers, opportunists who feed on death and destruction, can they be considered humans? Haven't they already lost their every essence of humanity? They are nothing but wolves in human flesh. If they have forsaken their sight of humanity, where does the question of rights even come from? Let us be cautious not to dilute the sanctity of human rights by extending them to the propagators of violence, for in doing so, we risk making a very mockery of the very values we hold dear. Human rights, after all, should be a shield for the vulnerable, not a cloak for the perpetrators of harm. Thank you.
Thank you, Akshit, for your stance. Now we will move to the rebuttal session.
As there are no questions, so we are now done with the English session of this debate. We are thrilled after listening your
Thank you,
insightful
sir.
debates
Thank you, ma'am.
and arguments that were really insightful and great. We were like a really great session. So after these power-packed performances, we will take break. See you all in the semi-finals. Thanks.
In the Hindi session, after 5 minutes of break.